So, as a way of a bit of an introduction, Tim is from BDO, one of the leading accounting firms, the global. And as everyone knows, I'm with Enable. What we're going to talk to today, and Andrew raised it on a slide earlier, was when we think really simplistically, we have buying, finance, and sales. And finance, so they kind of look at both sides. And what we're going to talk about today is more aimed just at that finance bit. What is it that, if you're in procurement, why are finance asking these questions? Why are they looking at these things? Same from the sales angle. And for the accountants in the room, you're just going to love this. So, BDO. Tell us a bit about what it is kind of BDO do and what you do there, please, Tim.
Yeah, no, thank you. And thanks for inviting me this afternoon. So I'm the head of risk advisory, so I'm a senior partner at BDO. We're the 5th largest firm in the world. Professional services, audit, tax, and advisory. So I sit in the advisory stream. So I'm not an audit partner, but hopefully I can give you some insights on why your external auditors keep chasing you up for more information about rebates. My primary focus with the team in risk advisory is around internal audit, internal controls, third-party assurance, so all highly relevant to rebates. Also in my group that I run, I have commercial advisory, and I've got my head of supply chain sitting, there he is over there waving his back, Fraser Paget. We also have governance, risk and compliance, and also we work with clients on transformation. So I've actually looked at rebates with clients across all 4 of those areas, and work with clients to help to sort of support them to sort of get better control, processes, etc. around rebates. The reason I'm here is that it's a real key topic for me from what I see out in industry, the clients that I work with, retailers, wholesalers, manufacturers, etc. It's all relevant, and not everybody does it great. So constantly having to sort of keep sort of talking to them about how to make improvements. So let's explore that a bit more.
Yeah, so we're going to dive into probably the most exciting area of the 4, audit, to start with. So is there, when we talk about audits, and when most people here will have experienced one at some point, are there any kind of typical best practices or advice that you'd consider when looking at audit, preparing for it, with rebates in mind?
Yeah, I think, so 2 angles. One, if you're looking at it from an internal audit standpoint, obviously what the internal auditors are trying to do is evaluate how you manage the rebate process, how much visibility you have, whether your processes are efficient and effective, level of knowledge and understanding of the people that are running the processes, because their aim is really to help the organization to manage its risk. So what are our risks about not effectively managing our rebates management process? Your external auditors, they've got more of a requirement to your shareholders and effectively a signing off around your accounts. So what they're looking for is around accuracy, they're looking for transparency, and they're going to really want to get into trying to substantiate the numbers that are being provided to them. And it's a real grey area over the years about contracts, about rebates, about revenue recognition is very, very high on their agenda every year. And that's why you guys get challenged quite a lot as to what does this actually mean? How is it working? How do you process these? And how do you ensure that we are getting accurate insights into our rebates?
And I think as well, Andrew highlighted it earlier, the numbers that are at play here, where there can be multiples of profit, more than your entire payroll. So these numbers, when an auditor comes along, they're going to be front and center, because they're also, in many cases, quite subjective. Did we hit the target? Didn't we? Depends who you speak to, that kind of thing. So what kind of risks are auditors looking at when they're coming into your business?
There can be a range of them. If you went through the entire rebates process that Andrew was talking around, which, you did that great. That was a fantastic sort of presentation on what those key stages are. They're going to be interested in all of those, because the risk that they're going to see is about how valid the contracts are, whether you actually have contracts. I'm still going out to numerous clients, ones that you would really expect to have nailed this down given their profile and what they do, and half of them don't have contracts, or what the contracts that they have got, they are, they've run out, they've not negotiated early enough. They aren't looking at sort of more preferential terms. They don't do any scenario analysis around their rebates. A lot of them aren't even processing them through. So there's an element of not actually understanding what rebates they should be getting, but also about how they process and get comfort they are receiving them. But what happens then is that a lot of accruals are made, a lot of assumptions are made, and they get reported, and obviously with the impact that can have on revenue and revenue recognition and margin, that's very key for the auditors. So they really need to walk through that process. They need to get the comfort that you have a handle on your contracts, on your agreements with clients, that you've actually built in rebates. We still see a lot of contracts which actually don't actually have them in them. We've got contracts which are open-ended and don't have an end date. And then when you go back and try and renegotiate, the suppliers or what have you, they're not interested because you're lower down in the pecking order than you think you would be. And I think that's been some of the key challenges that we've had with clients, is that they think, great, I must be one of the biggest distributors or sellers of this particular product, and actually you're not. So we have to spend quite a lot of time. Fraser's team goes around looking at the whole sort of supply chain infrastructure and looking to see actually where do you sit within that pecking order, and actually how much sort of power have you got in order to go back and renegotiate on contracts.
And as accountants, we like to be the merchants of doom. So when rebates go wrong, what kind of things can go wrong, and what are the consequences when these things happen? I think looking at that from a financial reporting perspective, but also reputational, and even just the impact on the organization itself.
Well, I think the main one that we typically see, other than operational, things can go wrong, is you're just not getting what you deserve. I think on the external side, if you're looking at it from a statutory audit standpoint, they will delay the process. There's a lot of risk sitting with external audit firms at the moment. So due to regulatory changes, due to real concerns that have come out the back of things like Carillion, a lot of the external auditors, their risk appetite has dropped through the floor. So they will want to see absolutely everything. And if they're not seeing it, we are seeing, and I don't know if anybody has some visibility of this or see this in the press, but you're seeing a rise in the amount of companies that are delaying the issue of their accounts, their annual reports. And a lot of that is because the auditors can't get the comfort that they need, that revenue is being accounted for properly, that margin is correct, and also that rebates and our contracts, we've got the visibility over them.
Yeah, and I noticed that in my time at Grafton, where we have the what we call materiality. So everything's allowed to be wrong. It's just how wrong is it allowed to be in the world of accounting? And that gap was getting smaller and smaller and smaller in terms of there's a lot of things that assess what that materiality is. But when you're given, as you said, the pressure, like the Carillion fallout, I know rebates was actually one of the things that, that the auditor is now being under investigation for, as to looking at their processes.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm privy to probably 3 or 4, which are probably, this time of the year in December on the run up to financial year end for a lot of organizations. I mean, I'm aware of maybe 3 or 4 high profile organizations that will have delayed accounts.
Wow, that's, yeah, we don't see that, but obviously you do. So in terms of trying to avoid this, what kind of reporting and prep, and I think probably looking more just at the reporting, what kind of reports should a business be looking at to make sure that they're going into an audit process in a good space?
I mean, there's a number of different types of reports that you can do, that you can run from your systems, hopefully, yeah. If you've got good systems. I'd say if you think this is going to be a concern because you are complex, because obviously that adds its own risk to it, this is the time to start having a look at your rebates management process and the inputs, how they're processed, and the outputs. because their external auditors are going to want to walk through that process with a lot more rigor than they probably have done in the past. So make sure that you know where your contracts are, that you understand what terms that you've actually agreed to. You know what amounts are in there. So documentation, any sort of reports that you can run that would help to better substantiate any assumptions that you've made in your rebates process. Reports out of whatever system you're using or spreadsheets on your rebates calculations, and make sure that you've got the right documentation to underpin it, because they will come in and they will sample test, and the sample sizes are getting bigger because again they want to get more comfort in these areas. So make sure that you sort of walk through your processes, and it's really key. What you don't want is a bunch of auditors turning up, because they can be quite expensive, especially your statutory auditors, and spending a lot of time at a time of the year where everyone's like mega busy and sort of asking you questions and trying to get information from you which you just think, oh my God, where is it? Or it's been filed away. We've had it where we've had delays of weeks because external auditors wanted to look at contracts to substantiate some of their sample, and some of these contracts had been, sent off to, one of the Iron Mountain or wherever, and then you've got to call that out, and then that takes 3 or 4 days. Then you've got to search through it. Then you've got to get the right terms, and then you've got to look at that.
And I mean, I'm thinking from experience here, having been audited many times on rebates, but I'm assuming like an auditor, they have this sixth sense where when they're speaking to you, if you're instilling them with confidence because actually you're organized, that's going to give them more comfort as well. But as soon as they get that sense that maybe something isn't quite right, they're just going to double down in that area. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, no, absolutely. We do. When we've been in it long enough, body language, behaviours, language which is just general language which is being used around, there's a level of confidence. I will say what we are finding with statutory audit, as well as the stuff that we do on internal audit, we're being asked a lot more by boards, external auditors, around skills and capabilities, and have we got the right people running those processes. And a lot of it is, have we got, and it's not just about, critiquing individuals, but have we got enough people in that process? Do they know, or do they have sufficient knowledge of what are we doing, how do we process things, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm now seeing audit committees where statutory audit partners are being asked by audit committee members about whether we think we've got the right people doing certain roles. Now, they won't necessarily have that in their report, but they will use that to determine how much additional work that they need to do. So I was in one last week. They have a May year end, so they were just having a sort of an interim planning meeting. This is a big organization, big retailer, and the auditor was reflecting on the work that had been done the prior year, and was saying, look, you still don't seem to have many more people in finance or many more people in that are dealing with contracts or rebates, etc. That's where we found issues in the past. We are going to have to do more work, and we'll also need to actually affect our materiality, because materiality is based on risk, a risk profile assessment. So they actually dropped that down, so they will look at more. And a lot of it was because we just don't have capacity and capability within the team.
Yeah, and I remember our auditors, it was also that key person risk as well. They highlighted that to us a number of years where they said you've got to spread that knowledge. As much as it's great having somebody who's very good at it, you need to share the load and the risk, and because they look at all kinds of risks. So taking things to a more happy note. So we've moved on from audit. What kind of rebate best practices do you see your clients? What practices are world class in your kind of opinion?
Yeah, I think that, there are companies out there that we see that invest in the right way. They invest in the people, they invest in the technology, they have good sight of their contracts, they are using systems like Enable, some others, moving away from more complicated spreadsheets, putting people into, I had an organization last year that had about 4 people who were just processing rebates, across about 10 different spreadsheets. And 2 of those got moved into different positions, but they were more focused on the contract negotiations. 2 of them were running the system. They were using a rebates management system, which they bought in. So there was a project, obviously, to load in all of the contracts and deals, etc. But then 2 of them, because they'd been there for such a long time and they sort of understood the rebates, they understood the suppliers, they understood what they actually moved more into a sort of supplier negotiation, talking about sort of pricing and strategy type roles, and that was highly effective. But I'd love to see more of that out at clients. We don't still see enough of that happening.
Yeah, and I think that feeds into, we've talked in the past, and I think I always categorize finance in 2 different ways. You have what I would call traditional finance, and that's the finance team that report the past. They report what's happened, it's very administrative in nature. And when Andrew talked about taking rebates and making them more strategic, I think a key part of doing that is then having the other side of finance. And that's the commercial, forward-thinking, able to influence the future, all of the business partnering sides of things, using those skills that these accountants have to actually complement these other functions. But I also realize a business is not just going to get the checkbook out and allow you to recruit these accountants. So what you need to do is create the efficiencies in the traditional world, and then, as you said, these people who have so much knowledge start to deploy them in a place that can add more value to the business.
Yeah, and I think talking about strategies, and getting the right people around the table, getting legal there, getting finance there, and talking this through. It doesn't just sit in one part of the organization. Getting that recognition that there are true benefits from being able to manage this in the right way if you've got the right information to hand, and the right people involved in that decision making. So I think that's really key. You can start your negotiations earlier. You can be doing more regular sensitivity analysis, and working that through as to how should that drive our strategy with our suppliers and how we engage with them. Looking at what the knock-on effect is by tweaking certain amounts. We talked about interest rates. Actually, is that built into our agreements? Can we do our own scenario analysis around if we want to look to see how interest rates have impacted, or even sort of inflation and how that's had a knock-on effect through any sort of rebates amounts. Yeah. Absolutely. Just getting the right people, breaking down those silos, getting the right people around the table is absolutely critical.
I thought it was a great question earlier, actually, about interest rates, because as an accountant, I was thinking, I'm really getting into working or the cost of capital and things like that, because it was fine when interest rates were so low. Cash wasn't, it's always important, but now we're getting back to that world where, yes, it's very expensive to borrow. It's very expensive for a business just to sit on cash. And so, for where I worked, we had 50 million outstanding at any given point from our supply chain. So we were technically bankrolling our supply chain. Every pound counts really in that world.
There's a lot of organizations which are having to change how they think. I've got a luxury house builder, which is a client of mine. They've even started thinking about creating their own funding for customers to buy their houses. So, organizations having to get very creative about funding, about revenue, about how they improve margin. We're seeing, it's tough times out there. You got as we've already talked about, supply chain issues. We've got big issues from an economic standpoint. We've got cost of living. We've got issues with access to talent. Coming out of COVID, we had a whole bunch of people who decided to take early retirement. All of these are sort of compounding factors that is making it quite a tough environment. We don't know how long that's going to last. You look at markets at the moment, you know, IPOs, listings, access to funding, all being delayed. You know, you're getting PE, so private equity, being a bit more picky and choosy about what they're going for, primarily because, you know, they've got to go and get the funding to go and buy this stuff, and buy these companies, and, you know, that's getting harder. And they want to maintain their returns because they've got investors. So it's all having an impact. So a lot of companies that I'm working with are looking internally about how they can improve, how they can drive efficiency. And rebates for me has always been one of those areas which has sort of been over there. It's felt like it was more of a nice to have sort of 5 years ago, unless it was really sort of a key part of your supply chain strategy and how you dealt with suppliers and customers. Many are rethinking that now and having to think actually a lot smarter and sort of look at the investments that they need to make in their organization to be more efficient, more effective.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you know, when times are tough, I recall, you know, one of the first places that you can go and look is your rebate line, and, you know, is that optimized? I would know that my commercial stakeholders, if they didn't hit their numbers for the month, the first place they'd be coming is to me in finance saying, that rebate number needs to be bigger, where's the rest of my rebate? And I'm assuring them that all of our suppliers are paying everything that they should do. But yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunity. I mean, Andrew's mentioned it. There's still a lot of businesses out there that are either maybe overpaying the rebate they're paying to their customers, or they're paying a rebate to a customer not driving any behavior, so it's not really enhancing their margins or their sales line. And then likewise from the buying, they're either leaving money on the table, or maybe they're driving the wrong behaviors internally, and we know creating risk all at the same time. So I suppose in wrapping up, technology is a key factor, what we're talking about. So how do you see technology evolving in kind of the rebate space?
Well, Andrew stole my thunder earlier when somebody asked a question about AI. So, but I think that genuinely is going to be what we're going to see is sort of, you know, in the next sort of even probably sooner now, probably over the next sort of year plus. I think there's a few elements that still need to be ironed out around it, but I think that will have a big difference. The sort of the automation, the robotics around it, the machine learning. I think a big area will be around contracts. You know, if you've got multiple contracts, will just be, you know, AI will be doing much more of the trawling through the agreements. And not just from a rebate standpoint, they'll be looking at sort of other sort of contractual terms, making sure that we're compliant or whether our suppliers are being compliant or customers. So I think that will flow through. I think there'll be a lot more in the scenario analysis and AI sort of doing profiling for us, which will help on our decision making. I think more commercial finance type activity as well. And what I mean by that is that sort of more commercially minded decision making with finance sort of sitting in there, but also bringing in ops and what have you, which will be to some degree technical, but it will be it's going to be more about having the knowledge and understanding sitting around the table as part of that decision making.
And just thinking, so from a BDO perspective, we talked about AI in rebate management, but I'm assuming the big accounting firms are also looking at AI. And we talked about audits earlier. I can imagine there's a role for AI in processes like that as well, which are probably going to be even more onto us for getting our rebates right.
Yeah, I mean, we look at AI in two ways, really. You know, how our clients are using AI, and how we're going to get assurance around that. So we're going to have to look at algorithms. We're going to have to look at how you are using the system to really sort of give assurance that it's been set up correctly and it's been used correctly. And also how we're going to use AI to deliver our services to clients, but also to do audit work, for example. You know, we've already talked to, well, in the press, I think last week, one of the big four firms has said that they ran some AI over some financial data for a client and identified 3 frauds. So, you know, so it's coming, yeah, and it's evolving. A lot of it's going to be as it always has been, access and quality of data that is sitting there that we're looking at. Yeah. I think really over the next sort of 12, 24 months, going to probably be quite a bit of a change in that landscape.
Yeah, no, that's, yeah. I only just thought of it when you were talking about the AI, and I was thinking, yeah, if the boot is on the other foot and the AI is being used to look at the business being audited, suddenly you can look at, manpower's not a problem, you can look at everything. So there's no more hiding a little number here at the back of a spreadsheet. That is going to be picked up.
Yeah, logically it's been, I mean, we've been able to do that to some degree for quite some time. You know, data analytics, we've been using that. We've been using process mining. So we've been able to get under the skin of things. But again, it comes back to the quality of the data, whether we've got it, whether it's accessible, whether it's in the right place. You know, if you've got that, then you can run AI. And AI just means that it can keep running through the program and looking for anomalies, et cetera, and learning from what it's finding. I think the other thing with AI will be make things easier for things like benchmarking, you know, looking at how others, so you'll be able to more broadly ask those questions. Obviously, you know, from a data privacy standpoint, don't stick up your company information on ChatGPT, otherwise it stays there forever. But you know, some of that information is there, some of that benchmarking information, so that will help as well as part of the decision making.
Brilliant. So I suppose we'll hand it over now for any questions. Anything at all?
I'll be the runner for questions. Questions, hopefully not from the back. Hey Richard, how are you?
Do you see a point when auditors will require businesses to have a systemized rebate management system? You know, Excel just won't satisfy you anymore.
That's a really hard question because I think it's really going to depend on the type of organization. I think the more complex it will be, they will mark organizations down if they don't have that, because it's more than just about the ease of them being able to have the visibility. It's the aspect around, again, goes back to that efficiency and effectiveness and decision making within the organization. Obviously, they wouldn't necessarily, you know, if you've got other sort of IT priorities, then obviously it has to fit in with the landscape. But I think over time it will become more the norm. Certainly where rebates, sophisticated contracts, sophisticated supply chains become more prevalent, because they will continue, their risk appetite will continue to diminish, really. It's really getting hard for, and you know, you can all get out your tiny little violins now. It's getting really hard for auditors to do that and sign that off, which of course in turn makes it really difficult for you guys as well. But yeah, sometime in the future, certainly for certain types of organizations.
Like in the next couple weeks, probably. Okay, I got time for one more question before our break.
Thank you very much. We have just one thing. Had companies say to us their auditors have said they can't have rebates moving forward unless they get a system in place. So not law yet, but already having that impact. My question was more around when you're looking at how much you are charging for these audits, having a system like Enable that can automate the whole process, I'm imagining that has quite a big impact on the cost for your services. Is that true, or does it not really impact it?
No, it will do. It's the same as, it would cost us a huge amount more if you're a big complex organization and you weren't even using spreadsheets, you were still using old ledgers, handwritten ledgers. So yeah, absolutely. The more technology that we've got, and certainly technology that we can interrogate, certainly get a good comfort that it's complete, it's accurate, all the information that we need is in there. That does make the job a lot easier. The more that we have to sort of stop and get in and walk through a process or go and look through huge numbers of sort of manual files and what have you, it's all time-based. And I think the more systems we have and the more comfort we've got around those systems, it's easier in terms of our planning as well. So we can do things more remotely, we can use more data analytics, we can use, you know, a lot more technology to get that assurance around it. So it does help.
All right, Tim, Mark, thank you very much. Appreciate it.